You mind telling us your first name?
Yes, my name is Rachel.
Awesome. Can you tell us what your dreams were as a child?
My dreams as a child, well, when you're a kid, it changes every day. There were a couple consistent ones, though. I wanted to be a veterinarian for a while. There was a minute there where I wanted to be a marine biologist. But most often, I wanted to be some kind of fantasy creature off in another world.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your childhood and your general relationship with your parents?
General relationship with my parents. When I was a little kid, they were great parents. Especially because not a difficult kid. I think I was just in a difficult situation. I was really severely bullied at school, and my parents probably did the best they could in that situation. They're very loving parents, but it was weird for them to have to kind of give me up every day and let me go and be abused by my peers. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they did a pretty good job, like just being my parents and also just kind of filling in that like friendship niche that I didn't really have at the time.
How would you describe your relationship with them?
It's strained at this point, but only because I have never moved out of their house before. I think that pretty much any 26-year-old is gonna be tired of living with their parents. And they were great parents to younger kids. I still see them interact with younger kids all the time, and they're such great parents basically, but they have a hard time with grown-up kids.
What's the biggest thing you learned from your parents?
I feel like I'm still learning stuff from them every day, in both the traditional sense and in like, there's a little bit of like, okay, so my dad did that, so I'm just gonna not do that. But I feel like one of the biggest things that I learned from my mom especially is just compassion. I have vivid memories from being a little kid and just like not having that compassion, and she really trained it into me to the point where it's a part of my soul.
Can you tell us about your first love and how that felt?
Well, if we're talking places, my first love was absolutely Disney World. My parents brought me when I was 2.5, and it just imprinted on my memory. First love, in other ways, it gets more complicated. Do you want me to ramble?
You can ramble, yeah.
Ramble, yeah, okay. First person I was ever in romantic love with was a married woman last year, and it took me a really long time to figure out I was gay. And she and I started talking not long after that. We just met on the internet, and I knew she was married, and we just kind of ended up in a thing anyways. And it was fun for a while. It's absolutely true what people say, being in love is like a drug. And then I was like, I gotta get out of this because ultimately she's not gonna leave her husband for me. So I did. I ended it, and it kind of blew up in my face a little bit, in a not so great way. But I mean, that was last year. It was like a really formative experience too. Like, there's like a lot of like memes on the internet, especially like in like gay or lesbian spaces, where they're like, oh, it's a rite of passage for lesbians to date a married woman. Mm-hmm. So I totally did that rite of passage, not intentionally at first, but now that I've done it, I'm like, oh, okay, this is normal.
Mm-hmm. How was the breakup?
Oh, it was terrible. I cried for probably 3 weeks straight. Luckily, I was not employed at the time, so it's not like I had to like suck it up and go to work. I could just be at home crying. It was very much like a bit of like a what is the point kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And a lot of like, I was worried that like, since it had taken me so long to find something like that in the first place, I was like, what if this is it? What if this is all I'll ever get, And in moments like that, it's really the silly stuff that keeps you going. Like, I had been invited to a costume party like a week later, and I was like, at least I have that to look forward to, like really silly stuff, but it just keeps you going. And then by the time you get to that, you're like, I actually kind of feel better. And then you can just kind of keep on rolling.
Within that story, because that seems like a fully loaded story,
yeah.
right? Is there anything you'd want to share about that story in and of itself?
I mean, what's pretty interesting is the entire relationship was over the internet. We never met in person. Which I think some people would be like, oh, well, then it wasn't a real relationship. But it was absolutely a real relationship. She and I talk to each other all the time. And it's just, like she was in Arizona and I was in Austin. And we were still able to have like an actual relationship, which is very strange because internet age, am I right?
What's the biggest thing you learned from that whole experience?
Aside from don't date married women. Probably that the right person will actually like my quirks and think that they're awesome rather than just ignoring them.
Can you tell us about your first loss or heartbreak? Same thing, whatever you associate with that.
My first loss, this is going to be really silly, but my childhood dog, his name was Buckwheat, and we let him get way too old. Like usually a lot of vets recommend putting your dog down before they can suffer, and we let it go way too long. And by the time we finally decided, like, because we were hoping that he would just pass peacefully on his own, but by the time it came around that we were like, we have to do something about this, because he was just so sick and he didn't know who we were anymore. It was really awful. And so I decided to stay because, they give you the option of, you can stay with your pet until they're gone, or you can go and you don't have to be here. So I decided to stay, and I think it kind of screwed me up a little bit more than I thought it would. Just kind of seeing him go.
How old were you?
Oh, that's hilarious because I was already an adult. I was maybe, I want to say 21, 22, which is, it seems silly for an adult to get torn up about such a thing. But I would say that was like the first loss I had ever experienced. Because up until very recently, my grandparents were all still around. I lost my grandfather just this past year, and I don't think that's sunk in at all. Certainly hasn't for my mom. But that doesn't feel like heartbreak, but I feel like it will in the future. You know what I mean? I think about it a lot, but it hasn't quite sunk in. Yeah.
Who would you say first taught you love and how?
Love, there's so many different ways of thinking about it, like romantic love,
whatever comes to heart. First thing that comes to heart.
Just compassion for other people, honestly, is what comes to mind. I think probably my mom, again, with that compassion, she really kind of drove it home when I was a really little kid, and ever since then, I mean, when I say really little kid, I mean toddler. Ever since then, I've been very just aware of that and how everyone needs positive interactions with other people every day, and I love being that person for people, just making someone's day better instead of making it worse. And love, you can teach a definition of love, but it's sort of this nebulous thing that sort of you just kind of have to either cultivate or feel already, or it's kind of there.
How do you define it yourself?
How do I define it? I always think, this is very cliche, I always think of it as a space in my heart, literally. I have lots of spaces in my heart that are already full, with my family and some of my best friends. I still have a lot of spaces left, though, for other people that I would like to have in my life. Obviously, someday I would love to have a romantic partner. Someday I would love to have a slightly bigger group of friends. I only have 2 friends. But not that that's bad, but yeah, I just feel like spaces are puzzle pieces.
What's a good day look like for you?
A good day. Well, a good day, I mean, it changes all the time. It totally does. I like checking a lot of things off of my list, whatever that list may be. Trying to be productive, it doesn't always go well. I mean, going to work, of course, is productive, but I see that more as something I just have to do in order to do the things that I actually care about. A really great day would be doing all of the things that I need to do and then being able to do some of the things that I want to do. Or even just doing some of the things that I need to do. And then some of the things that I want to do, like I play the ukulele. I'm not really good at it, but it's fun. And for me, that like doing that at the end of the day is like, not only did I get stuff done, I had fun too, you know, like, or like hanging out with friends, obviously.
Now, what's a bad day look like, and how do you get through that bad day?
Well, bad days can get really bad. Sometimes they're at work, and like the other day I had to leave work because I was just like, I can't be here today. I mean, bad days for me usually more relate to my physical health than my mental health. I have quite a few health problems. That like even if I'm in the right headspace to do something, sometimes my body will just be like, no, not today. Like, go back to bed, reset. Yeah.
How's that look?
Like the reset or the health issues?
The health and the reset, like the body saying no.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different moving parts to it, but the biggest thing is fatigue, physical fatigue. Like there are some days where for some reason I'm just like, I can't move. Like my, I could, but like it's like I'm like so exhausted. It's like I ran a marathon even though I didn't.
Mm-hmm. How do you deal with that? You just let it pass? You've kind of just gotten used to just letting that moment pass?
Yeah, I mean, I sleep it off usually. Like when I was in college, I did this a lot where I would just do like the bare minimum, like go to my classes, submit my assignments, and just sleep the rest of the time. I was much sicker back then though. I may as well say I have Crohn's disease and three types of tachycardia. Mm-hmm. And you know, there are just some days where it's like you need to sleep 14 hours, or yeah, you're just not going to get anything done.
What's been a humbling experience for you?
Probably that. I mean, there's obviously different levels of being humbled, but you know, when you're in an emergency room and people are telling you they're going to restart your heart in a second and you're not sure if you're going to see the other side of that, that's pretty freaking humbling. Yeah, I mean, stuff like that. And then there's like the humbling that kind of relates back to the compassion thing that I was talking about. Like you know, you're in your world, you're in your problems, and then you see a homeless guy who's probably been out on the streets since he was a young person, and you remember that it could be so much worse. And of course, when that happens, if I have cash on me, I give it to them. I unfortunately don't often have cash on me because, you know, I work retail, I go to school, that kind of thing. But yeah.
How's that, how's living with you know, your health situation, how has that formed your own perspective on life or your own view on life? Yeah,
I mean, I struggled with it for a really long time. I still struggle with it sometimes. It's given me a sort of like seize the day perspective, oddly enough, where like on days when I know I am feeling good, I'm like, okay, I need to go do stuff so that I can actually make use of this thing that I have called life, you know? I mean, it does give you like a weird amount of perspective, like when you see people who can just, you know, stand for hours on end or walk really long ways or can do, you know, like I look at athletes and I'm like, what would it be like, you know? Like a lot of people, athletes are just regular people, and then for me, like I'm watching them, they're like superhuman. Like compared to what I'm able to do.
What do you think is the hardest thing you've been through?
I mean, what's so funny is a lot of the hardest things that if I were to write them down and make a list, I would, list them. But when I was going through them, they didn't seem hard. Like when I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, I was only 17 and I was trying to, keep my grades up and keep my test scores good so I can get into college. And in the middle of all of this, I was diagnosed with an incurable disease that is triggered by stress. So like at the time, I was just like, okay, I just need to fix this so I can do what I have to do. And then I think the following year, I was really like kind of hit with like the actual like reality of it. What's weird about me, I guess, is I have like a total delayed reaction to everything. Like something can happen to me, good or bad, and then like it won't hit me until like 5 minutes later, 5 months later, depending on like I think the largeness of the thing. Like I've been catcalled before and then just not knowing what it was, and then 5 minutes later I'm like, hey, like that was a cat call. And by then, the people are long gone and I can't be like, why I oughta, but, sorry, what was the question?
What was the hardest thing you've been through?
Sorry, I digress. The hardest thing I've been through, I mean, it's gotta be one of my health issues. The scariest was definitely one of the heart ones, because at the time I didn't know it was tachycardia, which is, technically harmless. At that moment, I had fallen into arrhythmia, which is not harmless. And so like, it was pretty scary, especially because I had already had like prior experience with like hospitals and emergency rooms and how they work and how long they take. And so, I was used to like, if I have a problem going and, you wait a long time and like, maybe they'll be able to help you. And this one, like I came in and I told them what was wrong and they immediately took me back and I was like, oh, this means I'm dying. And I could have been. It was pretty freaking scary.
How was it emotionally for you? How was that like that's a reset, right? You get the news of a health condition and then your life kind of changes, you know what I mean? Because you have to take that into account, I would assume, all the time.
Yeah, you definitely do. The thing is, like, especially like with like a lot of chronic illnesses, by the time you receive a diagnosis or it comes to a head and you have to have some kind of treatment to fix like a bad situation, by that point you've usually been experiencing symptoms for so long that it's almost a relief. So by the time you have a diagnosis and a treatment plan and a path forward, you're like, oh, thank God, like it's not so much like an, oh my God, how am I going to carry this? It's like, okay, I can move forward now.
So for this next question, if you can go in your mind and think, this life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual. Can you tell us about a time in your life that you relate with the word war?
The first time I had ever heard it like applied in like a real life context, I think I was probably about 5. Or maybe younger, I'm not sure. And I remember my mom telling me that there was a war in Iraq. And I was a kid and I was like, it's not here, right? And she was like, no. And I was like, okay. And I kind of moved on with my life. And I think I didn't really grasp the concept of what war really was until I was in elementary school and you actually start learning history and that kind of thing. And I have strong opinions about the public school system in the US, and they definitely try to propagandize you to an extent. And, I always had like a sort of sneaking suspicion that it was, really screwed up. But of course, when you get older, you get into high school, college, you start to realize that there are better ways of handling things. Obviously, sometimes it gets to a point where there has to be physical conflict. I wish that didn't have to be the case. I don't have any personal experience with it. I am firmly pacifist myself. I'm very anti-conflict in both small and large senses. And I'm a little bit of a flower child, if you want to use that word. Um, but my mom was very much like that too. She still is very much like that, and she's still pretty pissed off that things haven't gotten better. Because she was an original flower child, and we talk about it a lot. And she's like, I can't believe it still isn't better. I can't believe we've had all of this social change for so long, and it still isn't better.
Do you think it's going to get better?
I would like to think it would. I think that a lot of change is going to have to happen first. Unfortunately, the chain of command is just so huge. Because it goes all the way up to government, president, and if it all comes down to the people who are sitting in the Capitol, then we just got to make sure that the people who are sitting in the Capitol are actually good people, and obviously that's like a pretty subjective thing. But
so step one, go and vote.
Yes, step one, vote, definitely.
So for this next question, it's the same type of question. So go in your mind and think. This life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual. Can you tell us about a time in your life that you relate to the word peace?
Absolutely. I've got a few of those actually, but the most recent one, and definitely the one that is making me smile right now, is this is why I was asking earlier if it was like any moral quandaries. This is drug-related, trigger warning. Okay. I went on a really excellent shroom trip the other day, and that was just sheer peace. That was like, not to sound cliche, but I understood everything. It was really like, I was like, this is how it's supposed to be. We're just humans with the gift of existence, and we're sitting in the grass like so many before us have, and this is what it's about. It's just existing and enjoying existence, and that felt like peace.
That's not vulgar.
No, it's just because it involved the.
Yeah. Was that your first time doing?
Yeah, that was my first time going on a shroom trip. I'm a pretty big stoner though, and I actually started smoking weed because of my health issues. But it gets you to think. It really does. I would say that most of my feelings about pretty much everything that I've even expressed here. It's from personal growth that has occurred since I started smoking weed, so that's pretty cool.
How long was? Tell us more about the
shroom trip.
Yeah.
No, it was, I want to say 4 or 5 hours, and I was with my friend because you should never shroom alone. And we decided to be outside in my backyard because I had a friend who had done a shroom trip inside, and she said just don't be indoors when you shroom because it's overwhelming for some reason. I took a pretty low dose, not a micro dose though, and I could feel it hitting. First all the colors got vivid, really beautifully vivid. And then I just a sense of just this insane happiness that you only experience at a place like Disney World or something. And I was just sitting in my backyard, and I had this insane happiness, and there was this beautiful song playing, because I was playing songs from my phone, and I was just like, oh my gosh, everything is beautiful. It was pretty cool.
How is that, did that impact your outlook on life in general?
Totally. I decided to go, because I had been wary of psychedelics in the past, and I decided to go on the shroom trip because I was really struggling with my path forward and what am I going to do with my life, because I only got one life, so better choose. And I was talking to my brother about it, and he was like, shroom trip. And I was like, seriously? And he was like, yes, everything will become clear, shroom trip. And I was like, okay. So I did, and it was great, and it totally made me realize pretty much what I want to do with my life and everything, really. I'm not endlessly enlightened or anything, because that's stupid. Nobody is. Even if they tell you that they are, nobody's that enlightened. But it
definitely not if they tell you that they are.
Exactly. Chances are they still have a lot to learn. But it gave me perspective, at least for myself, especially because I had been struggling with my own personal life path and that kind of thing. And it really cleared things up for sure.
Yeah, I've heard people describe shroom trips, and I've always felt that, maybe yours wasn't on a high dose, or even ayahuasca trips. And it sounds like a very much spiritual experience.
Totally.
And
emotional.
Emotional, spiritual. And I also think that, when people share those, that part of their story with me, I do think that is the truth, like what you felt in that moment.
I think so too.
I think that the love and the connectedness and that peace, like that is, to me, that is the ultimate reality. That is what's real in life. That is what, that I'm pushed towards, and it's not letting go of that. It's like knowing that, and like even like your mom, and you look at the outside world, at least on the news and what's going on, that can bring you down.
Yeah,
because
for
know
sure.
that we have this within us as well, but we also have this other side, and I guess it's like even though we have that bad side, it's always making the decision to push towards the good and letting that propel you wherever you go.
Yeah, it also made me because there's like this moral quandary that is as old as man is, in which people argue whether man is inherently good or inherently evil. And when I was on my shroom trip, I felt like it was inherently good. Mm-hmm. I felt like the default, the thing we were supposed to be, was good.
I agree.
And everything else was stuff that we all created. Like we being the collective, humanity, whatever, it's all stuff we came up with. We were just supposed to be monkeys hanging out in the grass,
Loving each other.
Yes, exactly.
Can you tell us about, and we might talk more about what you just talked about, but a truly joyous moment in your life?
I've had a few, not the traditional ones, because, like I mentioned before, I'm Jewish, so in like lots of Jewish families, you hear the phrase joyous at lots of life events, bar and bat mitzvahs, weddings, baby namings, brisses, you get the idea. So that's so funny that's what came to mind, but I wouldn't call my bat mitzvah joyous. I would call it stressful. It was fun though. I would call, a joyous moment for me. That was just a weird tangent, so sorry. When I'm with my family, it seems like there's going to be moments like that. Like, they happen randomly, but there are those moments where you'll remember them forever. And it's so rare that you remember it in the moment. But there was this one night in the early pandemic, and nobody was sure what was going on or what was happening or if the world was ending. And my dad, for some reason, he bought this like fancy fire log. I don't know why. He was just compelled to. And we decided to sit outside and light it in the fire pit and just hang out back there in the evening. It was just a little cold outside, and we laid out on the grass and we were just looking at the stars all night. And like, that was pretty joyous. That was pretty cool.
Can you describe how that felt?
Awesome. And like I said, in that moment, I was aware that it was one of those moments that I would remember forever. And it was like, it did make me feel like everything was going to be okay. Like even if there was this unstoppable plague or stuff like that, it felt okay. Like, I think that the joyousness came from the feeling of okayness in that moment.
What inspires you?
What inspires me? What doesn't inspire me? I'm a bit of a dreamer. So like, I can see the randomest stuff and be inspired. Whether or not I use that inspiration to do something is a completely different story. But I am inspired almost every day, several times a day, depending on the day. Sometimes that culminates in writing a story. Sometimes that culminates in attempting to write a song. I never do well with that though. Sometimes it culminates in really strange attempts at art that will never see the light of day. It's all around. It's everywhere. That inspiration, it'll get you.
So back to the shroom trip, and you said when you did that you were looking for clarity and your path forward. I am curious to know, what was it like before then, as far as your perception of your path, and then where are you at now with the perception of your path forward?
Yeah, I mean, I was really confused and just kind of floundering and trying to find my purpose and like, I mean, because I have made a couple wrong turns. I have a degree from UT that is pretty much useless. It's in Jewish studies, which isn't a bad degree. I think it would be really useful in New York, but I don't live in New York. You know, with that degree on my resume, I have encountered a lot of anti-Semitism and a lot of being turned away from jobs because I have that as my degree. Obviously, because I'm Jewish too, but it's a little bit more of a dead giveaway, you know. And I was really unsure, and I was worried that if I were to try some other thing, it would be the wrong choice. And I do think it, like, obviously, I did say that the shrooms were responsible, but there were other things at play too, like around this. Ooh, so sorry, that was the microphone. Around the same time, I realized that I can go back to UT and I don't have to start over a whole other degree. I can just kind of add on to the one that I already have, and my minor was writing, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to get a degree in writing.
What do you want to do with that? You want to write books, I'm assuming?
I would like to be able to express myself for a living, whatever form that comes in. Like I said, I am inspired by lots of different things. I would... If someone wants to pay me to write down my opinion, as so many people are, I would love to do that. I hope to seek a certificate in creative writing as well. So if that is something that happens, I would love to be able to get out this novel that I've had in my head for many, many years. That would be really cool. Or even just like making a living using my brain, even if that just comes in the form of writing descriptions for articles of clothing for a magazine, you know, like, I don't mind as long as I can pay for my life and I'm able to do the things that I love on the side.
What keeps you up at night?
What keeps me up at night? Drinking tea before bed. No. Honestly, not much. As I mentioned before, I'm a really sleepy person, and not even the most horrifying of intrusive thoughts can keep someone with hypersomnia awake. I have things that'll weigh heavily on my mind, but yeah, not much can keep me up at night.
What keeps you going every day?
What keeps me going? This is gonna sound so stupid bad. No, the promise of being able to do something fun, just even if it's just a little thing, every day. And I try to make it every day because when I was a high school student, I made myself absolutely miserable by just doing the things that I thought I was supposed to do. And since, you know, we mentioned this before, you've only got one life, you gotta live it. I try to do at least one fun thing every day.
Does this count as one of the fun things?
Yeah.
So for this next question, imagine you're in the hospital today with only hours to live. What would be your regrets, if any?
Regrets. Not doing more, not seeing more. Literally just, we live on a planet with vast oceans and soaring mountains and great artifacts that our forefathers built, and I have seen a handful of them. There's so many more to see. There's so much to see. And honestly, my main goal in life is just to get to a point where I can go see those things.
You told me what your dreams were as a kid. What are your dreams now?
My dream now, if we're going to talk really out there,
Yeah.
having a career in music, actually. Okay. I am first and foremost a singer. I have been since I was very little. I almost majored in vocal performance when I first went away to school. That didn't go well. I ended up dropping out of that school, which is how I ended up at UT. It was originally a different school. And I dropped that school, I dropped that major because at the time I was under the impression that if I was going to be a musician, I had to be an opera singer because that was the direction I was vectored in at the time. And I should have definitely done something in music, just not that. I just didn't know at the time that that was an option.
You're the co-author of your life story. What's your storybook ending?
I mean, someday having a loving partner, being able to support myself, potentially children eventually, because that's something that I do want in my life in 10-ish years. That's really soon. But yeah, and just like being able to support myself and support my want to go and see the rest of the world, and just, yeah, being able to do the things I want to do.